Suzanne takes you down to her place near the river.
For me, it goes back to that God-given potential that everyone has. I desire to be one of those channels and vehicles in which I could empower others to be able to reach that God-given potential. So everything that we do as a community, as a nonprofit, it's really about empowering people and guiding them to find and recognize their light when the world keeps putting labels on them that are otherwise, and then helping them to shine that light.
That was HYEPIN Im, my guest for today's podcast.
And you want to travel with her, and you want to travel blind, and you know that she will trust you.
Welcome to the Sue Speaks podcast, searching for unity in everything. I'm your host, Suzanne Taylor. How can we turn the world around? Can we turn this world around? That's what I talk to my thought-shaping guests about. In fact, everything I've done has been in pursuit of the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible, buoyed up by that famous quote by Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. In my podcast, I talk to people who could make major differences. It's not that they are fixing this or that, even global warming or addressing any particular danger we're in, but they look to what would create a system change, where all our challenges would be more easily addressed in the cooperative world that we need to become. With threats now to the very survival of humanity, it can't be pie in the sky to think big. We have to think bigger. First, we need to care about each other as much as we care about ourselves. Then we'd be working with a united humanity that's beyond the self-service and greed that run us now. We'd be open-hearted instead of closed-fisted. HYEPIN Im is a perfect person to speak to major transformation, where how she sees that would bring smiles to everyone. Her advocacy is for happiness. How to get us to go for happiness instead of for money. Okay, along with going for money. When I heard HYEPIN speaking, where she was dealing with living a life of meaning with happiness as a goal, I got excited. I have a good ear for genuineness, where people aren't blowing smoke about getting to the world I want to be living in. And she impressed me as having a bead on bringing that about. HYEPIN was born in America of Korean descent. She was a star student and then a venture capitalist with big jobs in the corporate world. In 2001, she made a radical switch when she founded FACE, a nonprofit in Los Angeles here, which serves as a bridge between the national Korean American community and the larger community that gives Korean American enterprises and peoples considerable support. You know, I can't get HYEPIN out of my mind as some girl next door enlightened sage. And she and I should be sizzly together. We both graduated from college summa cum laude, which is testimony to our getting 100 on just about everything. I hope, HYEPIN, we can tune the listeners into the awesomely intelligent perspective you have. We're lucky you bring it to the world, from your connections to the White House, to CNN and NPR, to the New York Times, the Washington Post, as a speaker and a writer and a board member of many organizations. And I know that all came about after you switched careers. I think people's turning points are revealing about who they are. So on this road to happiness that we're going to be dealing with, would you talk about what you started out to be and the switch you made to what you're doing today?
Sure. I graduated from UC Berkeley, and I thought I was going to go conquer the world. And instead, I went from job to job and being at the brink of success, and each of the doors would close on me. And in 2000, three really compelling events caught my attention. And I decided that I would send an application for seminary. And part of the backdrop story related to that is that in junior high, my dad suggested that I should go to seminary. And I thought that was the last thing I wanted to do with my life. I associated poverty and other challenges. I mean, definitely my parents being in ministry, there were many blessings, but I also saw the downside. And so I really didn't want anything to do with it. However, I grew up with my mom telling the story of Jonah, where God calls you and you run away and you go through hell and end up having to do it anyway. And that was my mom's story and so many other speakers. And I didn't want to end up like that. So I told God in 7th grade, God, if you ever call me, make it really clear and I will obey, because I don't believe in going through unnecessary pain. But lo, God, that I do not want to, but I will obey you because I fear you. And so as mentioned in 2003, very compelling events happened. And I reluctantly, but obediently sent out the request for the application for seminary. And lo and behold, all the doors that had shut in my life, graduating from Berkeley, all started to just swing wide open. I never imagined the very things that I was pursuing on my own would only happen when I actually answered the call to seminary. So it has been an extraordinary journey to where I am today.
So now speak about, who were you before? What were you focused on? And what did you hop over to?
Mm-hmm. And so when I graduated from Berkeley, I went into the Big 8 at the time. Now it's like Big 4, but the leading public accounting firm. And so I was there doing tax work. And then it wasn't enough. So I went to USC for my MBA. And I thought I was going to leave public accounting and went into consulting. But I needed some accounting hours to get my CPA license. And I ended up back in public accounting and audit. But from there, I worked for a company that went public and then worked for a California Science Center, which is a museum for their capital campaign and then their sponsorship work. And then from there, I worked for a venture capital firm, but it was unique. It was an African-American church who had set up an affiliated nonprofit. And so through that nonprofit, they could do anything that a nonprofit could do. And they started a venture capital firm that had a double bottom line. Definitely the financial, but also a social bottom line in helping minorities and underserved communities also access venture capital. So that's the space that I was in.
Well, now you are in such a different place. So tell me, what was the God message? What was the thing that spurred you to make such a radical change?
Well, I have to say there were many, but the one that I would like to share is that I was at a kind of a very like a spiritual training class that is 3 years that my mom, she would drag me everywhere. And 3 years, every month for 3 days, we would have this intensive training. And this is during my venture capital time where my daily commute was 3 hours and more, right? And so by the third evening, I'm exhausted, tired, and they're also speaking sometimes in difficult Korean language. So it's not even like I was so inspired. So by the third evening, I'm ready to just get out of there. And the speaker says, and if you want to pray some more, please bow down. And I'm going, oh gosh, I'm going to have to stay a little bit longer if I don't want to stick out like a sore thumb by dashing out, right? So I'm in this very unholy mood. I bow my head. And in an amazing way, again, I've been a believer all my, days, on earth per se. But, hearing God's voice, like almost like a literal voice, is something that's very rare. And when I bowed my head, God took me to my freshman year where I was at a church retreat. They asked all the college students to write down how they want to serve God in their life. I wrote, I want to travel around the world, just something I wanted to do. But I wrote, I want to tell the amazing works, the miracles God had done in my life to inspire others to believe. Because again, my mom would drag me to every religious, spiritual training. And in these revivals, I would hear these speakers talk about these miracles. And I realized, wow, God is living God, not just in the old Bible times, but today. And that always inspired me. So that's what I wrote, but I forgot about it. And almost 8-9 years had passed. But when I bowed my head, took me to that point, made me remember And then what I heard, it wasn't audible, but it was so clear. I mean, in a very powerful way. What I heard is, you don't need miracles when things are going great. And suddenly at that moment, the narrative of my life flipped upside down from someone who may have been abandoned by God, who are being punished by God, who veered off, to where the God of this universe had taken a moment to actually hear, remember, and was in the process of answering that prayer. And I have to say, I grew up in a Korean church where when they do this, like, it's called 통성기도, or like out loud vocal prayer. And it just, people like speak loud and everyone bawls, right? And it's just me who's looking to the side and to the left and going, God, please help this cold, cold heart, right? But that moment, just the amazing grace of God, all the pipes started to run. And again, that I wasn't abandoned by God, but in fact, that God was actually taking time and was guiding my life, was actually answering my prayer and leading me to this place, was definitely one of those defining moments. And that led me to say, okay, God, I don't want to, but I'm going to go send out my seminary application request.
What was the thing you were doing for so long? What was it? To have a name that we would know? Or
you know what? In Korean, it's 영성 훈련, but it's called spirituality training. They talk about, in some ways, they equate your life journey to the journey that the Israelites took from Egypt into the wilderness, into the promised land. And that, like, our life journey, that God called us from this slavery, right, to this wilderness of life, to then taking the right steps to this journey of promise, of the promised land.
so you're on the journey to the promised land, clearly, or maybe you're already there.
I'm on the journey.
Now, I like your formula because I've heard you before, I know your formula, so to speak, but I loved what you were saying about the different aspects of life that you now understand make for happiness. So can you say something about this?
Well, so actually, the work that I do, as you say, in running a nonprofit could be very different from what I had done in the past. But actually, in some ways, all the training that I had done and experienced has really made me very unique and irreplaceable. So what I mean is that during that journey of 8-9 years, I was constantly thrown into jobs where I was forced to bring people together that didn't want to get together. I was always forced to be starting something from nothing. Even when I was entering long established companies, they would then suddenly start a new department and ask me to lead that effort, right? So it was that constant, again, starting something from nothing, and then also having to learn a lot of stuff instantly and become an expert. So in audit, if I go into this healthcare company, suddenly I have to become a healthcare expert. If I go into the financial company, suddenly I have to become a financial, industry expert. Or in the museum world, as each exhibit comes, whether it's about the body or about the galaxy, like suddenly I would have to become an instant expert. And then the final piece is that in each of these arenas, I would have to figure out how to quickly get to the center of power, the decision makers, and be able to navigate in that space. So that authority is not given. I would have to figure out how to earn it or gain the trust or the cooperation. And so today, running a nonprofit that touches mental health to banking to housing to the environment to whatever, that I'm having to, again, gain instant expertise to be able to advocate and to lead constantly, particularly as an Asian American. I would say until the recent past year, highlighting and attention on the anti-Asian hate, I would say the Asian community has constantly been always the stepchild, or maybe even worse, in which we're never included. And so we're having to constantly advocate and bring the attention of not just the policy and decision makers, but even in our own community to convince them the value of engaging and connecting and moving beyond their comfort zone or maybe even their discomfort or fears as well. And again, just bring people together, advocating all those skill sets that I had to learn perhaps in a very difficult and challenging environment. Now I get to use all that in my life. And so it has become all those difficulty and the challenges have turned into a blessing and strength. And I think, again, as a believer, when I think about the Garden of Eden, where Adam and Eve eats the apple, that's the forbidden fruit, and God actually curses them. But it's interesting because in that curse, at the end, is still the blessing. And I think that's kind of a secret of life or a universal principle, in that in the new earth, blessing comes through that struggle. It cannot happen without that struggle. Like light cannot be light without darkness. In the same way, much of the blessings of life, you would not appreciate it, right? Unless that struggle is present or you go through that struggle. You know, even like weightlifting or exercising, all that, the stress is present, but you have to then transcend through those stresses, through those struggles to receive that blessing.
Well, I like that attitude, that point, that perspective very, very much. My daughters all have the understanding when they're in the middle of terrible things happening to them. Oh, terrible. But Mom, I know it's going to make me stronger. It's so wonderful to have that perspective because we all have adversity, and some people just go down and some people just get smarter, and I like that's one of your main tenets that I heard you talking about. I thought, right on, I like that a lot.
Although head knowledge and actually implementation when you're facing it is not the same, but at least to even be aware and have that as a starting point still helps.
Yeah, it doesn't, eliminate the pain, but underneath it, it's that knowledge. Okay. I know this syndrome. I know that this is what will teach me something, it's that confidence that some people have and some people don't. But even understanding that that's the goal is helpful, Oh, that's what I'm supposed to do. Yes. That's why I like talking to you. You have wonderful perspectives for people to understand from. HYEPIN, I heard you talk about those 3 main points, and I thought that was so brilliant about you need to find your calling was the first one. Can I invite you to talk about those? Yeah.
So I think that, first of all, I was just sharing this with my colleagues and even my husband the other day, that finding your place in the world where you could shine is an amazing blessing. I have to say that me in a different setting, I could be someone's burden and pain, but me being in my current setting, I could be a blessing to the world. And I think that for each of us, we're on this journey, and finding that place, again, where you could shine, I think is a combination of, again, your calling, your passion, and your capacity. And if you could kind of find that intersection, I think that is an amazing place where you're going to bless the world and in turn be blessed. And I think, again, of Susan Boyle with Britain's Got Talent. She had this amazing gift, but she really didn't have that platform. So she had this amazing gift, right? The capacity and perhaps even passion in singing, but she didn't have that platform. And again, that's where, again, finding that place in the world and that platform, Britain's Got Talent, allowed her gifting to be seen and recognized and be valued, right? And soon after that, with a little bit of mentorship, right, she became a superstar. And so I think if each of us could find that space, that platform, with the intersection of all 3, that is a tremendous blessing. And unfortunately, I don't think everyone finds that place. So that's one. I think also finding the right partner in life. Again, you're the same person, but you could be so loved, by one person and be such a source of aggravation to another. And again, we all have adversity in life, but we all have our inadequacies and imperfections. And, again, finding that life mate, soulmate, who's going to love you and support you and allow you to shine. again, is a rare gift and blessing that, again, not everyone finds. But I would say those two are really very powerful. And then with your health. So,
Wow.
yes.
If you don't find the partner, there's also the family, that whole idea of relationship
Yes.
at an intimate level, which,
Yes.
ideally it's wonderful to have the partner, but, we're not all so lucky, you lucky
That's
girl.
right. That's right.
And then you also talked about relationships in your work environment.
That's right. So, I've been running our organization for a very long time. And you come to realize first that what you think is a given is not a given. So, I think when I first started, I thought employees doing what you ask them to do, that what they agreed to do, like that's a C. Like, and if they do anything more than that, that's an A. Well, I've come to learn that actually, if someone is able to do what you ask them to do, what they agreed to do, that's actually an A plus because finding those staff is really hard to find. But also I've learned that not everyone's like you or me. Like we're all different and we're all passionate about different things. And so I've come to realize that finding people who match your passion and perhaps the capacity is very important. And so I think about like the Army, there's the boot camp, and then there's like the Army Ranger, which is even at a higher level of the elite, right? But you have to select yourself to sign up for these events, because if you don't, even at the basic boot camp, for those who didn't choose to sign up, it will be an abuse. That's how they would see it. And especially at the Army Ranger, that would be more than abuse, right? And so again, finding people who value that space, right? As an employer, setting up a space and, there's high expectations of what this work entails. And it has definitely challenges, but it also brings amazing blessings. And to identify and work with people who value those blessings, because for some, it's not a blessing. Like I said, to be selected as an Army Ranger, some people would see it as an honor. But for the wrong people who's not a match, they would see it as an abuse, right? And so to find colleagues who have that passion, who have the similar communication styles and, capacity, I think that is a tremendous blessing.
Years ago, I can't remember where I got it from, but I printed pencils, God, that was a long time ago, but they had a little insignia on them. Above all else, one must find good friendships, Buddha. Where did I get the nerve to print pencils with a quote from Buddha? And where there was a quote from Buddha, I don't know, but I did. Anyway, that seemed to be something in his perspectives. These are very basic kind of attitudinal things, partly attitudinal, of letting adversity raise you higher, and partly what you set up for yourself, following your purpose. I imagine that you moving from your corporate world to your current nonprofit service world was huge for you to come to this happy state that you've now incorporated into a formula, which I think is just perfect. I'd love to be working with one of your enterprises, because I look for what can we do to change this world. And one thing is our attitudes, like you talked about, all those attitudes that bring you happiness. And then what are we going to do in the world? So you have any thoughts? Like if you ran the world, what would you do?
I think that for many of us, it's just human that we put meaning behind what we encounter in the world. And if we could change our thoughts of creating a new meaning, then perhaps that might either energize us or decrease our pain, or maybe eliminate the pain. And I think for many people who are using drugs, part of it is because they're trying to suppress their emotions of the pain that they're experiencing in the world. And that reality might be, very valid, but perhaps by putting new meaning behind that could again ease the pain. And so I remember listening to a speaker, and he's now a world-renowned speaker, but when he was growing up, he felt rejection because his dad had left his mom for another wife. And in his heart, also, he had heard in the bathroom, like some girls saying, that guy, never going to get married. He's so ugly, no one wants him or no one would want him. And so between the rejection from his dad and hearing this comment, it was this, place of tremendous pain. And then at a certain point as an adult, he remembered that his dad had visited him. And he had initially interpreted as like, my dad doesn't visit me enough. He's not just abandoned his mom, but him, and had forgotten about him. And so that's how he had interpreted it. But at a certain point, he realized the kind of effort that it took for his dad to cross through this very dangerous river, right, to come and meet him. And there was kind of this aha, like, oh, my dad loved me. And he risked his life. That switch, of the interpretation of his dad towards him gave him that new, like, confidence, self-esteem as well. So I do want to say that, how we interpret things, and if we could control that, because, even today I was driving in with a colleague, and, we all have our different pet peeves. And I noticed that something bothered the colleague so much more than me, but it's again how they interpret that situation. And if we think about the world, how we think and control our thoughts and create new meaning, interpretations of what we encounter could be an amazing skill that would make the world a better place. And also as a believer, again, that through word that God created, God spoke the world into being, and through the word created order out of chaos. And they do say, even psychological studies, scientific studies say that words can be equally powerful and dangerous than just physical beings as well. So for all those things, I want to say yes. Going back to then this place of changing the world, like if I had all power, what would I do? So I would first just say that, as we discussed earlier, in life, we will face adversity, period. But I think it's really evil when there's man-made evil. And so even the separation of North and South Korea, I think it's only like 30 miles or something. It's a very short distance. And yet there have been family members who have been apart for over 5 decades. And some have died, never being reunited. I think that's evil. I think that's man-made rules that make people's lives miserable. And so if I had all the power in the world, all those man-made rules that make people's lives unintentionally miserable, I would get rid of all that as well. And I think that there's also, just in terms of schooling, as mentioned, I think education is important. But I would say not just about like math, science, reading. Those are things that I think are core. Going back to the 3 things that make you happy, right? I think relationships and communication and empathy skills, I think everyone should learn. That would, I think, get rid of most of the problem, because I think, again, communication breakdown that's what leads to divorce, to fights, to wars, all those things. So if we could teach everyone communication, relationship, empathy skills, and how to also then deal with the imprinting of pain in our lives, right? And all the sexual predators, like all of it, I would make sure maybe that they could get treatment too. Maybe there's a way to get treatment so that we are able to deal with that. And I think, again, as a believer, revealing truth, helping people to know the truth, that will set us free. That's a word from Jesus. When you know the truth will set you free. And as an Asian American coming through this recent anti-Asian hate, and particularly the optics of Black on Asian crime, all those things, some of my best mentors have come from the Black community. But whenever we hit this topic around Asian store owner and Black customer, I see this rigidity. And very good people would, instead of like responding in empathy when someone says, I've lost my livelihood, my whole life investment, instead of responding with empathy, again, I would see this Dr. Jekyll and Hyde. And that was a struggle, because these are people that I care for, that I respected. And if they were people that I didn't, I would just blow them off as bad, evil people. But because I knew otherwise and I wanted to be in relationship, I had to address this dissonance. And in my seeking understanding, I realized that there were certain narratives that were being told in the Black community about Asian store owners that put them in the category of evil, the Asian store owners in the category of evil. And when you do evil on evil or violence on evil, then you're doing good, right? And so I came to realize, okay, there is this incomplete truth. It's not necessarily untrue, but there's more to the truth. And how can we address these myths that we tell of other, not just Black and Asian, but all communities, all people? And if we could break down that myth and expose the truth, right, that would set us free from this hate that we have of other. And so that's something else that in pursuing truth and telling truth in such a way that does not divide us, but actually sets us free from hate and fear, would be another place that I would want to put energy. And I have been, as a nonprofit, I am seeking strategies and programs and efforts that would allow us to come together to see the truth, true truth, so that, at the end of the day, we're all in the same boat. Your happiness, your pain will lead to my pain. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the world and the universe is very intertwined, and not just with human beings, but even with nature and the environment, right? And so again, how do we train people to understand that there will be consequences to decisions that are not mindful of one another?
Well, that is so basic. If we could just get that one handled, we wouldn't have to do anything else. Of getting people educated. One of my other guests, Giles Hutchins, is into how would you change the world? Education in all different kinds of ways. But because there is a rightness to things, there is a natural do unto others to things, that the way we would be designed to be happy. And there's some amount of educating that actually could bring that about, like in the school systems, where the schools have become so focused on objective truth and making money and succeeding in the world, and have really cut back on the arts, and probably never have had good education about what if you taught all children meditation and mindfulness? And, there are some programs now. One of the things that I'm paying a lot of attention to is the idea of kindness. Just as a big idea, like what would make the world change? Well, if people were kinder to one another, we'd be in a different world. I mean, it's just, that really is kind of all it would take. And then I'm aware, because I'm paying a lot of attention to this idea of kindness, that there are some programs in schools for little kids, preschool, kindergarten, that are actually teaching kindness, encouraging, doing whatever it takes to tune kids into this idea of kindness. And it makes a huge difference as they go through school. They're different kind of people from other school kinds. These are so simple, actually. In some ways, the world is incredibly complicated. Oh God, but in other ways, it's very simple. That basic things that, could be happening. That's why I really just like the way you think. You think down to these very core basics, Is there anything, like, for instance, are there any books that you would recommend? Do you have like a favorite? My favorite book is The Universe of Green Dragon by Brian Swim, a creation story. And it is about how we're all part of this Gaian idea. We're here to be the edge of creation, where we can really serve the creation as the animals couldn't do. Anyway, do you have a favorite book that you count as your sort of Bible, other than the Bible?
I have to think about that one. But honestly, let me go back to the Bible, because the Bible does teach about kindness and to love one another. But actually, it teaches a lot of principles that I didn't realize were universal laws. So I've done a lot of these kind of self-improvement trainings, including, Tony Robbins and all of that. And at the end of the day, what I came to realize was that the Bible, again, as a believer, that God is the creator, and he knows how he made this world to work and how he rigged us to work as well. So I'll give one example. So at the Tony Robbins event, he said scientific studies show that we don't just have a brain, like ecogram, is that what it's called? But also the heart. But usually they go off on its own, right? But when we come to a place of gratitude or beauty, of stillness and appreciation, actually the brain waves and the heart waves go in sync. And that's when you have absolute clarity. And I thought about that as a believer in the Bible. It talks about praying and to give thanks in everything, right? And to have faith. And so I was just thinking, in whatever is lovely, whatever is noble, whatever is such, to think on these things. Well, when you're praying, when you're thanking God, you're praising, everything and the beauty in the world. Actually, that's when your heart and your brainwave is going to go in sync, right? Two, again, when there's kind of a neuroscience of how, again, we visualize things. And when we visualize and feel what we desire, our likelihood scientifically of achieving that goal jumps significantly. Well, again, when you're praying, you're thanking God in confidence, right? In faith that it's going to be realized. So you're visualizing, you're thanking, your gratitude, you're feeling it. Well, voila, you're going to get to there. So I know that right now I'm going back to the basics that really, out of all the books, Bible really is key in learning about the universal laws and truths that God has put in place, for which I paid thousands of dollars in terms of books and trainings, that I'm coming full circle and going, you know what? The Bible tells all those truths as well.
Well, of course, when you're being good and kind, it isn't just for the recipients who are getting your kindness. It feels so good. It's what feels good. Aren't we crazy?
And they say that in terms of key to happiness, when you live beyond yourself, right, and you're constantly improving yourself, that those are the keys to success. Again, going back right to the Bible. So yes, by loving others, you're loving yourself and honoring ultimately God.
Yeah, these are so simple and so basic. And aren't we messed up that we do the opposite? It feels to me like the way to fix the world is so basic. How come we don't get it?
We're resistant. I have to go back to, in the Garden of Eden, one human sin that we still hold today is this questioning the goodness of whatever we're told to do. So as a kid, when parents tell us what to do, we second guess them, that it's meant to make our lives miserable, when really our parents have good intentions. Or perhaps your teacher, or maybe even your employer, as long as they're not evil, right? That they are putting policies in place or asking you to do things that will lead you to a place of blessing. But being human, there's this part of us that wants to second guess, that we know better, and that the good intended is really to make our lives miserable. And so again, that's another place that I think if we could change as human beings, that could kind of change a lot of dynamics in relationships too.
Well, one of the aspects of my saying, if you ran the world, it's not so much what the world needs. I mean, that's kind of, for people like you and me, that's a kind of an easy question. We know what the world needs, but how can we actually, in this world such as it is, like if you had power, not power to be God, and say, okay, I'll be happy. No. But if you had the power to change policies and affect the things that are, in your ordinary world, like what would you do? One of the things I would do would be, I don't know how, but I would bring everybody in the world up from poverty. Thank goodness this universal basic income idea is on the move, but it's in, the rich countries. I would give everybody in the world food, shelter, education, and healthcare. And then you have a world that isn't in survival. When you're in survival, you can't think about enlightenment. That's a word we could use. You can't think about making it a better world. You're thinking about surviving, getting food for the day. So I think if we brought everybody up And apparently we have enough resources to do that. We just don't have the will to do that. But I think about things like that, like what could we actually accomplish in the world if we were, the president of the United States or somebody who really was listened to, So I don't know if you have any particular thoughts that would fit that slot.
Well, if I had all the power in the world, if I was God, I would actually help people find their place in the world really fast in terms of where they could shine. But one particular area, two areas that I feel pain is first, my dad is in the nursing home. And I find that as I get older, I am fearful of my end days. I mean, as a believer, I know that I'll go to heaven and all that, but in terms of my days on earth as a senior citizen, particularly with dementia and everything else, it seems like my dad's living in like a living coffin, it seems.
Yes. My mom was 2 years in that coffin, so I know all about that.
So that there were better systems in place. If dementia is not cured, so I would ask for first curing dementia and all the other diseases in the world. But if not, that the care for elderly, that again, there was a better match, because the people with truly a calling and heart and capacity, it makes a world of a difference. When I see the different shifts of the care, when my dad's in the hospital, in the nursing home, when the right person comes, it just makes the world of a difference, right? Perhaps better pay, better screening, better support, more resources, so that, again, it seems like the heavy lifting is done by the underpaid, CNA workers. So maybe perhaps better pay that will bring, and so you would allow, some room for even the people taking care of, of these seniors, and soon you'll be me. So that's one. And then again, second piece is, I think, around discrimination. At the end of the day, as mentioned, all our lives are very intertwined. And I think some of the racist policies of this country has resulted in extreme poverty, which has also led to then maybe even public safety challenges and crime activities and all those things that really it risks your life. If you're rich and wealthy and at any given moment, your life could be at risk, or your wealth could be all taken away. I mean, just all those things. And so again, racist policies that really hurt everyone. I mean, I think we will all benefit when every individual could fulfill and realize their God-given potential. Then we could all be blessed. And I would like to find policies that could deal with that.
Yeah, it's a perspective that we would need about, what's important. And it's not about, dog eat dog, hurting others to get ahead yourself, And this is a major kind of shift that we need to make to where we care about each other as much as we care about ourselves. It's such a major cusp to get over, and some threat to survival if we don't make it. What about things of your own? Like, for instance, you have some heart's desire that, you hold as an aspiration of some kind?
Well, I have to say, first of all, I would like to have a house with a true master bedroom and Roman bathtub, right? But apart from that...
Wait a minute, this is the conversation we're not having. Wait.
For me, I would like to travel around the world. Every time I travel, I come to realize that I'm just as biased as everyone else in terms of when you don't know someone or a place, the default is not to upgrade them, but to degrade them, right? And so I'm constantly surprised of traveling to certain places that I didn't think really much of them, and then going there and finding beauty and rich history and just, their contributions, etc. So I think also in that way, when I meet people and I'm connected, then I think I'm much more mindful of what I say, because I know them, and that I know that my comments could impact their life and also their perception of me. And so I'm going to be much more careful of what I choose to say. And so I think, again, travel around the world will be something that I desire. I'm not sure if I'm going to ever get there as well. And then I guess I would like to continue on my journey of what I wrote that freshman year in college. I'd like to travel around the world, inspiring others, to believe in God by sharing the amazing miracles God had done in my life and to have that greater platform where I could do that.
Well, that is so beautiful. You may have sort of precluded my questions I told you to think about ahead of time, which we've asked everybody, but let's ask them now. I asked about mission. It's kind of funny because that's what you're talking about, but how about a mission statement?
Mm-hmm. Sure. For me, it goes back to that God-given potential that everyone has. I desire to be one of those channels and vehicles in which I could empower others to be able to reach that God-given potential. So everything that we do as a community, as a nonprofit, it's really about empowering people and guiding them to find and recognize their light when the world keeps putting labels on them that are otherwise, and then helping them to shine that light. So that's the mission that I have. And I've been doing so through the organization and in my network as well.
That is so beautiful, really. It's just so beautiful. And how about a one-line message to the world?
Shine your light. You have light. Shine your light.
Well, you can run my world. Really, I'm serious. You are so tuned into the basics of what would make the world work. Why doesn't the world get it? So anyway, we got works to do, girl.
Oh, you know what? The one more piece is to be curious, right? It's not just about shining your light and curious about your light, but equally curious about others and seeking what their light is as well, because they have it. They have it too.
You know, I heard you say that on the other thing, and I wrote it here. Oh, that's beautiful. So I'm glad you brought it up here because I forgot to ask you. So beautiful, beautiful. Well, I think that's actually a secret to life also, curiosity. When I started tuning into the human potential movement and got crazy by my mother and father's lights, all I would say to them was, I just have one request, be curious. I was not too successful at that, but I think that is a secret to life. In the meantime, many secrets here. I hope everybody will listen to this and find their purpose and turn their lives around. And I'm so grateful to you for coming on and talking to me about this. If I could talk to people just like you, I think in short order, we'd have a different world.
Amen. Thank you for the invitation. It was an honor.
My pleasure.
Now Suzanne takes your hand and she leads you to the river.
So, dear listeners, thank you for tuning into my Sue Speaks podcast, and do subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. You can visit SueSpeaksPodcast.com for notes on what we covered in this episode and for additional information about my guest. Also, I'd love to engage with you there to hear your opinions. How did you feel about what you heard? Did you learn anything, or were you inspired to act in any new way? Or do you have something to add that would let us know what you know? I'd like to have this be a go-to place for people to grab cups of consciousness and fire away.
And you want to travel with her, and you want to travel blind, and you know you can trust her, for she's touched your perfect body with her mind.